Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 180. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and award-winning game designer and podcaster, Ross Payton.
Hey, it's Ross Payton with Roleplay Book Radio. Excited to be here on Storycomic.com. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Before we went live, I was chatting with the fact that I would listen to you. I was an avid fan. When I was working overseas, I would download you on my iPod and listen to the latest episodes of Role Playing Public Radio. And it's funny. I'm checking out, and I realize that you now have a veritable sea of podcasts that you've been doing.
I do.
Now. You have tons of them.
I do. One would say too many, but I would say no, definitely. I still have time. I can do another podcast.
Yeah. So I have you on here to talk about the Fate core system, and you put out Base Raiders, which is a superpowered, and I love the fact it was inspiration of a dungeon crawl, as a dungeon crawl that is a superhero base invading game. So that's pretty awesome. Do you want to just first of all? I could ramble on for hours about talking about your podcast and talking about all your other games, but I promised before we started that we were going to talk about Base Raiders. Sure. So let's jump in and talk about Base Raiders. Talk about you have a long history of game design, also learning and reviewing and talking about role-playing games. So my first question for you is, when you created Base Raiders back in 2012, right, or 13?
I created the Kickstarter was 2013 and it came out 2014. So yeah.
So, and I know you mentioned in a previous interview that you did kind of shop around to figure out what would be the best open source license system to use, and you landed on Fate. Do you want to talk about it? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Fate. I wanted. Yeah, that was the first. My requirement was that I wanted a standalone system. I didn't want to write a setting book for an existing system. So that excluded things like Savage Worlds, which would have been possible, but I wanted Fate. Because I really I really wanted the flexibility and the versatility of the system, and I also wanted I wanted it to be at least a little crunchy. The version of Fate I used first came out in the Kerberos Club, and the Kerberos Club had a really interesting superpower creation system that I liked. I also aside from Savage Worlds, I also asked if I could use the one roll engine, but I didn't hear back from Arc Dream. Which is the system they used for Wild Talons. And I really liked the superpower system for Base Raider or for Kerberos Club, and I adapted it for Fate, or I adapted it for my game. So that was pretty much it. I mean, the options back in 2013 weren't nearly as much as they are now. Now I'd have to do. I'm actually looking at Fate again. I am actually thinking about a second edition, and I am thinking about using Fate again. But I think I would use something based on. I'm actually looked at Fate Condensed, which came out in 2020, and it actually has a lot of ideas I like.
Right.
And oddly enough, I am running a Fate core campaign right now, although it's not Base Raiders. It's like a action horror thing, kind of like Resident Evil or BioShock or something like that. So I might write a campaign book for a Fate core setting in the near future, because I really like my premise. But anyways, I'm just rambling at this point. So yeah. Out of the options available to me at the time, Fate was by far the best one. So yeah.
So how was it different for those that might be learning Fate and knowing about the games like Fate core system in 2016-18, where we are now? How is it initially different? What were some of the systems, as you mentioned earlier, that now have been tweaked? What were some of the base systems that you noticed in the Fate core system back in 2013 that's different now?
Yeah, I think a lot of not just Savage Worlds, but also Mutants and Masterminds. That was another one I could have written for, but that would have been a setting book. not a standalone thing. And like Savage Worlds and Mutants and Masterminds, like they're very crunchy, very like they don't give like as much narrative agency to the players. And I think in the superhero genre, you need to give that narrative agency to players to give them some say. Like the whole idea of aspects and fate points is a great way to push for everyone to push the game in ways that they want to, because you have a good fate game going when players are asking for compels. They're like, hey, can I get a fate point if I do this dumb thing? And that's a dynamic because players don't always want to be like, there are some players who always want to be min max. I'm going to win every single fight. I want to be, but there are players who are really more interested in the story, and they're okay with like their players getting in a certain type of trouble, and they like the idea of the conflict and the drama that results from. So that's, I think, the biggest thing is superheroes games are not like tactical combat exercises. They're stories, they're narratives, and you kind of need that narrative agency to sort of like bend the rules, because it's like, who would win in a fight, Superman or Batman? Well, it's whoever the writer wants to win the fight. Like, it's not like
that's right, yeah.
And in game terms, it's whoever has the most fate points to blow. Like, that's what matters. Like, it's not like, well, Superman, he can do this and this and this. Yeah, but there are times he can't do that because the writer thinks, nah, it's not really cool if the story goes that way. Like, and that's the great thing about Fate, is that everyone has some say, some pull in determining how the narrative goes.
Right.
And which is ironic because, like, I'm taking that, but like then it's about dungeon crawling, which is the most tactical kind of like role playing game most people think of, is clearing rooms, killing monsters, taking their stuff. But like, it's that juxtaposition I think makes Space Raiders really fun. So yeah.
So what were some of the things that using the Fate system, what were some of the tweaks that you kind of personalized it to kind of fit within your Slang Design LLC model?
The biggest thing I think is the goal system. Which is like so Base Raiders, the whole premise of the game is that it's a game about superheroes, but minus the actual heroes and villains. Like, the idea is all the heroes and villains are gone, but they leave their stuff behind. So average people get a chance to like take their powers. The whole dungeon crawling thing came back because hey, take a look at this cross section of Batman's Batcave or the Fantastic Four skyscraper, and be like, well, that's a dungeon to crawl. But the narrative thing is that, like, in superhero comics, it's always the status quo, and it's always Batman and Reed Richards are going to use their wealth to fight weird villains, but they're not going to cure poverty or cancer. They're going to, and well, what if you had those powers? You could actually do that. You could actually make a campaign about like stealing Reed Richards' stuff and finding a cure for cancer and like giving it to everyone in the world. And then the other thing that a system I had was like loot. To come, like, Fate is great for narrative agencies, but it's not about like I get X points of loot. So I came up with loot points as a way for players to modify their own characters and change them. Although in practice, like that is something I would definitely revise those mechanics for second edition, because that was the idea. It didn't quite work out in practice, but the goal system I'm really happy with, because like I want, like, the whole point of a long running RPG story is to like have something change, something happened, and this is the way to represent it mechanically. Like, the world has now been cured. Everyone's cancer has been cured now because of you, because of your risk of your life. You did all the stuff. You punched out the bad guy, and you get to cure cancer. So yeah.
So is that like you meant the goal system? Is that kind of your version of like character progression then?
Well, it's not character progression. It's progressing the campaign setting itself. The idea is now there's already character progression. You can use loot to improve your character, and there's the same kind of things about character advancement that you would in any Fate game. But the goal system is setting a goal external to yourself, to your own improvement. Like, I want to cure the cancer, and then you can come up with milestones, and like, here's what you need to reach these milestones. Like, first you need to get this much loot of technology in order to build a lab. Then you have to research it. Then you need this thing, and the GM can sort of give you a whole like outline of all the stuff you need to do in order to cure cancer. And then like not just cure cancer, but like then distribute it so that everyone in the world it can be cured of cancer. So like that's what the goal system is to do, is to make an actual change to the campaign setting. Your version of Base Raiders. So by default in Base Raiders, only humans have civil rights. Well, you could make a game about like giving aliens and sapient robots civil rights, and that could be your game. Or it could be like everyone thinks the Insane Clown Posse is the coolest band in the world. Like that could be the goal. And then, all right, yeah, you're promoting this band, and now we're gonna see what happens when the Juggalos rule the world. So, all right, it's whatever the players want to make it, but it's a chance for the players to set the stakes themselves,
Right.
and then the GM to kind of like, well, okay, well, here are the challenges you would have to overcome. And yeah, so it's a way to sort of frame a campaign, because I don't want Base Raider games to be about go to base of the week, loot it, move on. Like there has to be something more, right? Yeah. So yeah.
So it's interesting as a game designer, and with a game that's almost 10 years old right now. Have you heard? Have you have you heard any stories or seen any actual plays where someone played the game where it surprised you? You're like, I didn't even think about that. That's pretty cool. Or there's something where you're like saying in the back of your head, you're not supposed to do that, or something like that.
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen like players like messing because it's meant to be a kitchen sink kind of gonzo setting where like I like the idea of mixing technology and magic and all this crazy stuff together. But like there's a lot of character type like players, the fans of Base Raiders have made so many interesting characters to be like, oh, that's cool. Like there was someone who made a character recently for a one-shot game that I ran where his character was called Empanada, and it was a duo. One was a guy who had like advanced AI cybernetic implants, and he had a little AI talking in his head, and that okay. But then his buddy was a psychic capybara with incredible diplomacy skills. Like nobody wanted to. Everyone loves the capybara, and so like they would. Another character was an undead parkour guy, and he was dead when Ragnarok happened, but he got brought back to life. So he used to be a bad guy. Now he's trying to figure out what his place in the world is, and he's really into So there have been so many original interesting character types that it's hard to keep track of. Like one of the first games of Base Raiders I ran, I used there's also like a dungeon creation system where players can like, oh, here's a rumor about this base. Okay, well we'll roll and see which rumors are true or not. And it turned out to be like, oh, David Bowie used to live there and like experiment and like, okay. All right, so you're going to David Bowie's base and finding out what crazy stuff is in there. It's like, all right, I didn't anticipate that. So, yeah.
So, what are some of the things, as you mentioned, that looking at maybe doing a second edition to this? What are some of the things that, as you mentioned before, that have been bugging you that you really want to fix?
The biggest one by far has been the power creation system. While I did like it at the time, it was the best option for me at the time.
Right.
But it's definitely there's diagrams. It's a bit intimidating for new players. I want to drastically simplify the superpower creation system. While I don't want it to just be like, here's a list of 20 powers and that's all you can do.
Right.
Like I want players to have flexibility and the ability to create really interesting and complex powers, but there's that balance between making it like at one end you can make it like your power is fire, you can do whatever you want with fire, versus which is way too vague, right? And then there's on the other hand there's Hero. Have you seen Hero? Hero is a RPG that's literally like the size of a phone book. Like it's like this it's like this thick, and like there's a video of somebody shooting it, and like the book stopped a bullet. Like I don't want a bullet stopping because it's extremely complex. It had hundreds and hundreds of pages of rules for every type of power. So you got to work between those two extremes. And so I want to make a new power system. Also, I realized recently, like, the reason I have all this text in the game about like why are there so many bases? Well, when you're a superhero or villain and you have superpowers, you need infrastructure. You need like a clinic that can treat you, where they won't ask questions about how you got irradiated and shot and stabbed. And you also need, like, if you're super strong, you need a gym with super heavy objects. You can't
Right.
just go down to your local gym and do that. If you have magic powers, you need a lab, or an alchemist, a wizard study. Or if you're a super scientist, you need a lab with lasers and robots. So I want to create a power system where the player characters have to follow that same path. Well, if you want to make your power better, you need to build your own base. You need to start, like, you need a place to recharge your powers, and you need to start like doing that stuff. Because I think that'd be really fun. Is the players like, well, if you have a secret base, you have to spend time keeping it up. And that means less time for your civilian life, and you have to choose: are you going to give up being like your secret identity, or are you going to like go be a base raider full time? Like, I think there's a lot of potential there. So I think that's where I'm in right now with the second edition, and that's what I want to playtest. So I have some rules typed up, but I need to, actually sit down at a table with friends and run it and see how it works.
And,
Yeah.
and my guess would be too is that you'd also have double down on the setting aspects as well, that people would be able to utilize, especially if you're concentrating on almost the main protagonist in a way, even though people are claiming is the base itself is the
Yeah.
main character.
Yeah. Like, one thing I want to do is like, I've run a lot of games in it, and I wrote some PDF supplements for it. And there's a lot of setting elements that I didn't have for the initial book that I would like to put in now. I came up with this one area in the game that I call the giant robot graveyard. It was just a premise for a one shot, but the players loved it. And it's basically like, well, back in the 70s and 80s, there were all these giant monsters, all these kaiju, and the superheroes just built a bunch of giant robots to fight the giant monsters. And then after a while, went all Pacific Rim. But obviously the good guys won, and so they scrapped all the robots and took all the dead kaiju and just put them into massive underground base in the Earth's mantle. And it's like, I kind of picture it as kind of like a lost hollow Earth continent kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so I want to do that as like, here's a like just a whole chapter, like, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on down here. Yeah, so there's a lot of set elements I've sort of fleshed out since I wrote the main book, and yeah.
It would this game also be just for someone that's interested in playing it or running it? Is this also kind of setting and agnostic? For instance, could somebody run this as a 18th century castle, or can they run this as a Wild West campaign or a cyberpunk campaign?
Well, I mean, in terms of mechanics, in systems, you can run it any superhero RPG you want. Like, I did conversion guides for Savage Worlds and Means of Masterminds, and like, run whatever superhero system you want. In terms of setting stuff, like, the idea is that Base Raiders embraces all the superhero tropes, including, hey, dimensional portals and gateways. So there's no reason why you couldn't, like, we're in the steampunk world now, we're in the cowboy universe now, and just set it there. Like, I mean, it relies on the idea of there being like a Earth that we recognize, but there were superheroes and they left all their stuff behind. So, like, what happened, like, imagine like the MCU, but now the Avengers and Thanos just disappear. They were the only ones snapped away, but the Avengers base is still there. All that stuff is still, Doctor Strange's sanctum is still there. So what would happen then? So like, the MCU kind of got into that with like which Spider-Man movie? The one with the Vulture, because the Vulture was just like
the first one.
Yeah, he was grabbing all the scrap of the failed alien invasions and like selling it to criminals. Like, well, yeah, that's a very Base Raiders thing. Like, take all that stuff and repurpose it. Like, that's great. Like, the Vulture was right. They're just stealing. They're just blowing up all of New York, but they keep all the alien technology for themselves. That sucks. Like, yeah, we all deserve a plasma gun. Like, yeah.
So yeah, I was saying, that was based. That seemed kind of inspirational of the Base Raiders. Did you have a
Hmm.
lot of people make that comment too on your Discord with that?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. When that
Yeah.
I actually did a role playing public radio episode called "The Vulture Was Right." Like we talked about how like yeah, no, the Vulture's 100% right. Like that was like Tony Stark is the greatest villain in the MCU. Like he caused so
Right.
much mayhem. Um,
I
yeah.
I think I heard that episode. Yeah. That
Hmm.
was yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it came out right after the movie. It's like, yeah, no, that's. I mean, right now, a lot of my fans will be like, "Hey, look, this is Base Raider." Anytime you come with a random character name or concept, like, "Oh, this could be a Base Raiders character." Gregor Samser found himself transformed into the invincible armored beetle soldier. So, like, taking Kamen Rider and Kafka's The Metamorphosis. Well, that's a Base Raiders character. Like, if you were just an office worker and then you were turned into a armored costume crime fighter for some reason, you would also think that was
Right.
that's Space Raiders. So yeah.
People
Um
looking at all these stories through a Base Raider lens. That's pretty powerful. Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a way to deconstruct the genre of superheroes, which are beginning. God, like even back in 2014 the MCU was a thing, but like it is still going on. So yeah.
So what would be for folks that would be watching or listening to this who say, hey, Ross, I got a
Mhm.
game idea in my head. Uh,
Mhm.
why why should I use Fate as a
Okay.
system?
um yeah, I see a lot of people, talk about Fate, and like there's a common criticism going around RPG Twitter about like, oh, it's too hard to understand aspects. But if you think about Fate as a game that rewards like fulfilling character arcs, narrative arcs, like the
Mm,
idea is in using fate points as currency, because like anytime something bad happens to your character, you build up fate points, and then you can use those when you think it's important for your character and to turn the tides. And it simplifies, like, I really actually like having fate characters having fewer stress points than like D&D characters will get, 100 hit points or 50 hit points or whatever, and then they take 20 damage and like, okay, whatever. But like fate characters get hit 2 or 3 times and then they're in serious trouble.
right.
And I think that's more narratively satisfying than a fight. Like we've all been in RPG fights where I hit you for 8 damage. Okay, you hit me for 7 damage. I hit you for 9 damage. You hit me for 11 damage, and that just goes on back and forth for like 30 minutes or whatever, right?
Right.
Like that. Though, is that really fun to have like two guys just hit each other with sticks for 20 minutes or guns or swords? And like, what's better is like, oh well, in order to not be knocked out of this fight, I got to take a consequence. I guess that broke my arm. Like, yeah, see, like that's
Yeah.
a lot more interesting. So it emphasizes, um, it's designed. Fate is designed in a way to create satisfying narratives for all the players, and everyone has some control. And the GM is the most control, but like every player has some say in what happens, and
Mm,
that and as long as everybody's like it, so it does require like more like being on the same wavelength as other players, because
right.
like it can, but like if everybody's on the same wavelength, it heightens the game for everybody. Like so yeah, I think that's the main thing, is it creates satisfying narratives.
Okay.
So which I think is really important, and it's still like mechanically in depth enough so that it's interesting as a game.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
um yeah.
And so, and where, and you did mention, as, and for those that are interested, you do have a couple places that you can pick up the game.
Hmm.
You do it all on Drive Through RPG. Has a whole
Yeah.
series on here. You also have it on Gumroad as well.
Yeah. Gumroad is because it was the only way I could figure out how to do a print and PDF
Oh,
combo.
okay.
Because I have some print copies. But I did my print run through Amazon's Create Space. Well, it's called Amazon KDP now, but like
Right.
Amazon has its own print on demand service. I didn't want to buy. I know DriveThru has its own um, print on demand service, but I didn't want to go through that. So it's
Okay.
just like It's a lot. Yeah, it gets into technical stuff quickly. But like, so if you want a print and a PDF at the same time, that's how you can buy it. You can also buy the print copies without the PDF on Amazon if you have an Amazon account. But
Okay.
yeah, it's very good. I also need to remove that Zombies of the World tag. I realize now. Oops. Yeah. But yeah, I don't get many Gumroad orders, to be honest. But it's kind of there just for the print and PDF option.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were some of the ideas? So I guess also
Mm-hmm.
from a marketing piece, or
Mm-hmm.
just from like a promotion of of a line.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you want to start off with the source book. What were some of the pieces? Because looking at this, you do have some adventures on there.
Mm-hmm.
What seemed to have been the most in demand for you? Because what's really cool is that you not only do you have some pre-made adventures for people to play, that you have also
Mm-hmm.
these what would you call these?
Well, some of them are new heroes or villains. Some
Okay,
of them
yeah,
are new superpower sources.
okay,
Yeah, death traps are a combination of death traps. Also, my friend Caleb Stokes, who is on Role Playing Bubble Radio a lot, and he's co-host several other another podcast I do. One of his thing, it became a running joke on the podcast that he really loved death traps, and so he wrote some death traps for my game. Um, but mostly it's new superpowers and like characters to
okay.
use in the game because as a superhero game, the character superpowers take time to write up, and characters take a lot of time to write up. And so by giving play, I figured just introducing fully statted out characters you can drop into your game, that would be a little easier, a little more helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, so you don't have to you don't have to spend time setting up your own stuff. Glitched reality. Like, what if video game powers were real? So, well, not like normal video game powers, like bugging out, like save scum. Can reload if they die and come back
Hmm.
to life. Mostly there's just like, oh, wouldn't this be neat? Oh yeah, I can make that into a base raiders thing. And the idea was just to keep putting them out. And so I did it for several years after the Base Raiders game came out, and then I just kind of got tired of doing it, so I moved on. And now I'm thinking about second edition, like Masks of Chaos. I'll just admit that was like, what if Payday was in the world of Base Raiders? They have, bank robbers who wear masks, and they basically have superpowers because Payday 2, you can get shot a lot, and you can yell at one of your other, bank robbing buddies, and he comes back to life. Like, they're definitely mutants or something. So,
Right.
yeah. But yeah, it was mostly powers and sources to throw into games. Also, like some of these characters are heroes; they can be used as pre-generated player characters.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um,
And I'm curious too, from a setting perspective, because as you said, people can kind of play it. Do you
mhm,
have a main canon setting for base raiders that you've been playing with, or have you
mhm.
been very explicit to say whatever you want to make up, you want to make up?
Um, I kind of do what a lot like some other RPGs do, is saying there is a canon, and it's basically Base Raiders starts 1 year after Ragnarok, like, and then after by a year after all the heroes and villains have Ragnarok is the event that caused is what the press calls the event that caused all the heroes and villains to disappear, and I basically say I'm never going to explain it in the game. You can come up with your own reason for your own campaign setting, but like it's always going to be a mystery in canon because I don't
Okay.
care. They're gone. They're not coming back.
Right.
And the by year base the idea of base rating becomes there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to steal. And so the concept of the base rating has come out. The black market for superpowers has been formed, and so all the setting elements are there now. I don't think I'll ever progress the timeline past that. It's always
Right.
maybe I will for second edition. Maybe it'll be another year, and it'll be like, well, more stuff has changed. We now know that there's a giant robot graveyard. And it's really big, and we don't know what's down there, and maybe someone should check on that. That seems the kaiju parasites have been mutating and evolving. We don't know. There may be nuclear weapons down there. It's yeah. But I'm not really interested in progressing the canon because the idea is you make it your own story. Like
Right. Right.
So yeah, there is that. So yeah, that's sort of the position I take on it. Like
Okay.
that's the timeline, but after that, I'm not gonna World of Darkness vampire where it's like yes, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Like the most important characters in the setting are your player characters.
Right.
And whoever, whatever their important NPCs there are in the campaign, you're the primary people. Like, there's no one more powerful than you. There are people as powerful as you, but no one's like a world beater. There's no Doctor Doom. There's no Superman. There's nobody. It's you. It's up to you.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So as you say, with that second edition, do you foresee yourself also doing updates on going so far on following the classic trope of having like a player's guide and it's in a screen and all that stuff too?
Well, not a screen. I mean, just probably because that seems like a pain in the ass to print. I do want to like I don't want to go further in the timeline, but I do want to like flesh out all the details that I've sort of mentioned, but I haven't hinted or I haven't like really explained yet. Like not just the giant robot graveyard. I also want to like mention Sanctum, which is like a pocket universe where all the superheroes used to. Oh, you're alien refugees from another planet. You've come here to get a life on Earth. Well, humans don't really like space aliens, so we'll just shove you in here. Don't worry, it's nice. You know, that kind of thing. So I actually want to write a Base Raiders novel, at least one. But I like the idea of exploring it in fiction. So yeah, I do want to write more. Like I think in terms of game, it would be the second edition. Playtest that
Okay.
first, rather than do a supplement. Like, and then if eventually do some sort of crowdfunding campaign for that. And if it does really well, then have like stretch goals for supplements and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing right now is just work on second edition and a novel. I have. Oh, I do want to stat out one new character. A character I wrote for another game, Road Trip, which was a campaign for monsters and other childish things. And the character I want to take from that, put him in Base Raiders, is Cool Rat, who is a rat who skateboards, and he used to be like a mascot for like a corporation, and he had his own theme park, and he's super cool. And I put him in mini games, and players are always annoyed by him, and he's great, and I love Cool Rat. So yeah, I want to put Cool Rat officially statted up in Base Raiders. So yeah,
Because that was part of a fourth edition supplement thing you made, right? Wasn't that the kids the
well there was Road Trip, which
right?
was a campaign for monsters and other childish things. I didn't write. The stuff I wrote for fourth ed was a fan project for the new world,
okay.
and that was
All
that
right.
was just that was the only stuff I wrote for fourth edition D&D.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I only use Cool Rat officially in Road Trip. So yeah.
Oh, okay. I got you. All right. So also, I want to just highlight for our viewers and listeners out there,
Mhm.
you have a pretty robust and amazing Patreon page that I
Yeah.
wanted to talk
Yeah,
about.
see, there's Cool Rat right in the middle. He's a
Yeah.
cool kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk to us about for folks that are interested in joining your Patreon. What are
Mhm.
some of the benefits they would be able to get?
Yeah, so well, yeah. Yeah, this is a great topic. I love talking about it. So at $2 a month, you get access to RPPR After Hours, which is a bonus podcast where we look at some of the weird, obscure, well, not obscure, but older RPG materials. A lot of adventures, and we kind of do deep dives on them. Like we're right now looking at a World of Darkness adventure, where the premise is, hey, let's go to Mexico and go to a Mayan pyramid and wake and kill an ancient vampire and drink his blood because it'll make us stronger. which is vampire is like a game of personal horror and like, oh no, I become a monster. Well, let's just go become to the jungles of the Yucatan and like it's a ridiculous program. But also you get access to the RPPR Discord, where it's a very cool community of people. In fact, one of my friends is doing a live streaming event on that Discord right now.
Huh.
So that's at the $2 level. You also get RPPR Illustrated. You can actually see images of the giant robot graveyard.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's every month there's a new image, like highlights from our actual play games or preview art from our next campaign, which is coming up. Actually,
Okay.
the art's already out there. And then at a $5 level, you get early access to the actual play podcasts. And then at $10 a month, I actually run an online game. I also switching off to doing consultations, so you get access to I run games of Base Raiders, and you can or Delta Green or other RPGs, and so you get a chance to sign up and play in games run by me. Or recently, I've started doing consultations. So if you have an RPG project and you'd like to talk to me about it, you could sign up for that level. And then at the $25 level, it's just like, you're awesome. And thank you for supporting me. I try and give them occasional benefits, but that's for the people who just really, really love the podcast. And I really love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's your masthead of Slang Design. It's for the Ross Payton masthead here is the Role Playing Public Radio.
Yeah.
You've been around since 2007. You've won awards for the podcast, and it is a main staple for anybody that's interested in role playing games and a podcast. Yeah. I can't think of a more well known role playing game podcast than yours.
Yeah, we try and cover a lot with Role Playing Book Radio. I've always wanted to cover the breadth of RPG. So we did cover 4th edition D&D, and we've done some one shots of 5th edition, but we cover a lot more than just those. Delta Green, Call of Cthulhu, a lot of we did a campaign recently of Heart, the City Beneath. That's the campaign we're running right now, and we also do reviews and interviews and discussions. I just put out an episode Monday of RPPR where we looked at the Terminator RPG and reviewed that really in depth, the whole hour was spent on that. And then talked about licensed games in general, what makes a good licensed game, what makes a bad licensed game. Even after 15 years, I still love tabletop role-playing games, and I like talking about them. So, that's sort of my bag. Not my only bag, but it is certainly one that I do. So, one thing, one series on RPPR that is updated sort of sporadically. It's called Game Designers Workshop. If you see up there at the top, it says game design right above licensed. It says games. Yeah. It's where Caleb and I talk about our games, because Caleb comes on. And like I said, he's a friend and he's a co-host, and we talk about the games we are designing. So, in the most recent episode, Caleb talks about his game, Phase Anatomy, which just came out this year. I talk about Base Raiders. Caleb talks about Red Markets, which is his zombie economic horror themed RPG. I've talked about some of the other projects I've been working on, and I've interviewed people like Jeff Barber is a good friend of mine about Blue Planet. He's working on that. Recontact is a new edition of Blue Planet that he's working on. If you are a budding game designer, you could hear us as we like Caleb, we podcasted his entire Red Markets from the first idea he had to the kickstart, to playtesting it, to kickstarting it, to getting it out in print and distributing it. So.
And is that the Ludon narrative dissidence? Is that the one that?
No, that's actually, I started that last year. This is actually not my idea, but Ludon Narrative Dissidence is a podcast I do with Greg Stolze and James Wallace, both very award-winning game designers. Greg Stolze did Unknown Armies. He's written for so many RPGs. Our most recent episodes on Base Raiders. But James Wallace did the Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchausen, Las Vegas. He ran Hogshead Publishing. And so each episode we just look at one RPG and talk about it for an hour to 90 minutes. It was just really in depth, talking about the mechanics, its historical context, We talk about a lot of great games like 13th Age, and we got to talk about some really weird, obscure games like Continuum, which is a game about time travel and has very detailed mechanics about time travel, and they make no sense whatsoever. It's an unplayable game, but I applaud them for trying. Yeah, we're actually gonna do a season 2 Kickstarter soon. Hopefully next month,
Cool.
to talk about more games. But yeah, that's like, if you want a real deep dive on a particular game from, game designers who have written and published games, like that is which apparently there's not really any other RPG. There's like one other RPG podcast that does that, System Mastery. But like they do, this game is really bad and silly, like riffs and blah blah blah. Like, from what I've not listened to it. I've listened to like one episode, but like that was my impression of it. I've heard that they're really good though. But like, people have told us that they, there's not really a lot of coverage of like in-depth reviews and critiques of games. So that's what we do in Letter Narrative.
So, if people want to learn more about your work, Ross, what's the best place they can go to?
I need to make a link tree. Slangdesign.com/portfolio has a list of all of my works. And my Twitter profile at Ross Payton, I talk about all my newest stuff.
Okay.
I have another podcast called Night Clerk, which is a music review podcast about vaporwave and haunted music. That would probably, if you want to look at all my podcasts I do, if you want to just go to my slangdesign.com/portfolio, or just go to my Twitter profile. I'll talk about it. I've done, that's honestly, I made that portfolio site just so I would remember that stuff. Like, there's a lot of 5
there's
years
a
later,
lot you've done.
That would be all my experiments and various projects. Those two places are the best part. I will try and make a link tree. I need to make a link tree with just like, here's all of my websites, here's all of my things. That would, or just subscribe to RPPR on podcasting app of choice, RPPR Actual Play. Yeah, those would be a good place. And Letter Narrative Distance now.
Perfect. Well, great. Ross, listen, when you get your Kickstarter up and running, we're talking about our second edition Base Raiders, come back on. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah. Get that Kickstarter up and running, and Base Raiders playtesting. I have no idea what timeline that is. I need to see if this idea I have actually works, which I think it will, but let's see how it meets the reality of the game.
Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ross, for coming on.
Yeah, no, it was fun.
So I'm gonna give you a veiled compliment, Ross, just so you know. Okay. All right. I spent about 15 years overseas for Peace Corps and Doctors Without Borders, and your podcast was one of the ones I always downloaded on my iPod.
Nice.
iPod. I had the little RPPR logo.
Nice.
On my iPod. I'm like, hey, I gotta listen to some Ross Payton right now. So I gotta listen to that on the bush taxis in West Africa.
Oh, nice. That's really cool. It's always really cool to hear if someone's like, I listened to this over here, like I was teaching English in China, or I was doing this. Like, West Africa's new. I'd not known we'd reached all the way over there.
You reached my iPod there. When you had to scroll it, when you had to spin it.
Yeah. So you had that nice little click sound. Yeah.
That's what happens when you've been podcasting since 2007, Ross. You've been in all kinds of technology.
Yeah. I probably been on some Zunes now that I think about it.
I'm sure you've been on Zunes. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.